Excuse me, I'd like to sign up for the talent show, please. Brittany Harrington turned slowly from the sign-up table. Her eyes swept over Talia from head to toe, the worn jacket with frayed cuffs, the faded jeans patched at the knee, the duct-taped backpack hanging from one shoulder. A cruel smile spread across her perfect face. "Did you hear that?" Brittany announced loudly, making sure every student in the crowded hallway could hear. "The black homeless girl wants to sing." She reached into her designer purse and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill, flicking it at Talia's feet like tossing scraps to a stray dog. "Here's bus fare back to whatever shelter you crawled out of. This stage is for people with actual talent, not charity cases who smell like thrift stores and food stamps." Her friends erupted in laughter. Phones rose from every direction like weapons being drawn. Someone shouted, "Sing for us, homeless! Show us what welfare sounds like!" A freshman started live streaming, caption already typed, "Beggar tries to enter talent show, LOL." Two teachers walked past without breaking stride. Nobody stopped. Nobody said a word. Talia stood completely alone. Crumpled money at her feet. Laughter pressing in from every direction like walls closing in. But not a single soul in that hallway could have possibly imagined, in just 72 hours, that same black girl in the thrift store jacket would open her mouth on that stage, and the principal herself would be wiping tears from her eyes. 72 hours earlier. The alarm didn't go off at 5:45 a.m. in the Anderson apartment. It didn't need to. Talia had trained her body to wake before dawn years ago, before the sun crept through the thin, faded curtains of their one-bedroom transitional housing unit on the forgotten east side of town. She moved quietly through the cramped space, her bare feet knowing exactly which floorboards to avoid. The one near the bathroom that groaned like an old man, the spot by the kitchen that squeaked no matter how softly you stepped. She couldn't wake Grandma Ruth before the oatmeal was ready. That was the rule she'd made for herself. The kitchen was barely worthy of the name, a hot plate balanced on a wooden crate, a mini fridge that hummed too loudly at night, a sink with a perpetual drip that no amount of tightening could fix. Water stains spread across the ceiling like bruises that never healed. The single window looked out onto a brick wall 3 feet away. But Talia had learned to make it work. She'd been making impossible things work since she was 9 years old. On the nightstand beside her grandmother's bed sat a trophy. Dusty now, but the gold still caught the light when the morning sun hit it just right. The inscription read, "Jefferson County Gospel Championship, First Place, Ruth Anderson, 1978. Talia looked at it every single morning. It reminded her that her grandmother had once stood on stages before hundreds of people, had once made entire auditoriums weep with nothing but her voice and her faith. Now that voice was gone. Throat cancer had stolen it 3 years ago, leaving behind only a whisper where there had once been thunder. "Baby," Grandma Ruth stirred beneath the thin blankets. "You're up already?" "Oatmeal's almost ready, Grandma." Talia brought over the morning medication. 4 different pills, twice a day, costs that Medicare barely covered and sometimes didn't cover at all. She helped her grandmother sit up against the pillows and began to hum softly while the old woman swallowed each pill with small sips of water. The humming became a melody without Talia even deciding to let it. The melody became words, soft, gentle, familiar. The song her grandmother had taught her when she was 6 years old, sitting on this very bed. Rise. A song about dignity in the face of degradation, about being unseen by the world but refusing to disappear, about generations of women who had been told they were nothing and had chosen every single day to be something anyway. Grandma Ruth closed her eyes and smiled, the lines on her face softening. This was their ritual. Every morning when Talia woke her. Every night before sleep took them both. The medicine that kept them alive came in orange plastic bottles. The medicine that kept their souls alive came in song. By 7:15, Talia was walking to school. 1.8 miles, rain or shine, summer or winter. She passed the bus stop where students from Westbrook Estates gathered in clusters, wearing their North Face jackets and pristine white sneakers, clutching Starbucks cups and scrolling through phones that cost more than 3 months of Talia's rent. They never looked at her. She had learned to prefer it that way. Invisibility was safer than attention. Her backpack, held together with duct tape and sheer determination, contained 3 textbooks, a ham sandwich wrapped in a reused plastic bag, and a worn leather notebook filled with handwritten lyrics. Some of the songs were her grandmother's original compositions, written decades before Talia was born. Some were Talia's own, scratched out late at night when sleep refused to come. All of them were precious. All of them were secret. Jefferson High School rose before her like a monument to everything she wasn't supposed to have. Manicured lawns that cost more to maintain than a year of her rent. A brand new gymnasium donated by the Harrington family, with a bronze plaque by the entrance, making absolutely certain everyone knew who to thank for such generosity. She kept her head down and walked through the front doors. "Morning, young lady." Talia looked up. James Davis, the school janitor, leaned on his mop near the east stairwell. 58 years old, 30 years at this school, and somehow the only adult in the entire building who ever seemed to actually see her. "Morning, Mr. Davis." He nodded toward the security camera mounted above them. "Just finished cleaning this hallway. That old camera up there's been watching this spot since before you were born." He chuckled. "If these walls could talk, right?" Talia managed a small smile and headed to homeroom. The classroom was already buzzing when she slipped into her seat at the back, the seat nobody wanted, the seat that made her invisible. Mrs. Patterson was squinting at her attendance roster. "Talia? Talia?" Before Talia could answer, a voice cut through from the front row, confident, mocking, designed for maximum humiliation. "It's Talia," Brittany Harrington announced, turning to smirk at the class. "You know, like tally, counting pennies. Fitting for her, right?" Laughter swept through the room. Mrs. Patterson pressed her lips together but said nothing. Did nothing. Just moved on to the next name as if nothing had happened. This was Jefferson High. This was the natural order of things. Brittany Harrington's mother had donated the gymnasium, sat on the school board, and had the principal's personal cell phone number on speed dial. Teachers didn't cross the Harringtons. Nobody with any sense of self-preservation did. The morning announcements crackled through the speakers. "And don't forget, students, the annual Jefferson High Talent Show is in 1 week. Winner receives a $2,000 scholarship. Sign-ups are open to all students." $2,000. Talia's pen stopped moving. That was 3 months of Grandma Ruth's medication. That was the electric bill paid through winter. That was food in the refrigerator instead of empty shelves. That was everything. She looked at the back of Brittany's head, blonde hair perfectly styled, not a strand out of place. Brittany had won the talent show 3 consecutive years. Everyone already knew she would win again. It wasn't even a competition. It was a coronation. But the announcer had said, "All. Open to all students." Talia tucked the thought away and said nothing. The cafeteria at Jefferson High operated on an unspoken geography of power, a social map as rigid and unforgiving as any caste system. Brittany Harrington and her circle claimed the center tables, the ones nearest the tall windows, bathed in natural light, visible to everyone who walked through the doors. This was the throne room. The athletes flanked them on either side like personal guards. Everyone else arranged themselves in descending order of social relevance, spreading outward like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. The further from the center, the less you mattered. Talia sat alone at a corner table near the trash cans and the emergency exit, where the fluorescent light flickered and no one ever looked. This was her kingdom. A single plastic chair, a brown paper bag lunch, and the precious comfort of being ignored. She had learned years ago that invisibility was a form of protection. She was halfway through her ham sandwich, the same sandwich she had eaten every single day for 3 years, when the shadow fell across her tray. Well, well, well. Talia's stomach dropped. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. The expensive perfume reached her first, then the click of designer heels on linoleum. Brittany stood above her like a predator who had cornered easy prey, flanked by Madison Keller and 2 other girls whose names Talia had never bothered to learn. Madison held her phone up, camera already recording, the red light blinking steadily. "I heard the funniest thing this morning," Brittany said, pitching her voice loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. Heads turned. Conversations died. "Someone told me you were actually looking at the talent show sign-up sheet. Is that true, homeless?" Talia didn't answer. She had learned that answering only made things worse. "Oh, come on, don't be shy." Brittany's smile widened, showing teeth that had cost thousands in orthodontics. "Actually, you know what? I think you should definitely enter. I dare you." The word hung in the air. Dare. A trap disguised as an invitation. "Yeah," one of the other girls added, voice dripping with mock encouragement. "Show us what you've got. Sing, dance, whatever poor people do for entertainment." Laughter erupted. More phones appeared, raised like weapons. The circle of onlookers grew until Talia was completely surrounded by a wall of amused, expectant faces. A teacher in the corner, Mr. Hendricks, glanced over, then deliberately looked away. "What's the matter?" Brittany leaned closer. "Can't even speak? How could you possibly sing?" And then came the $5 bill, flicked at Talia's feet like she was a beggar on a street corner. "Bus fare. Back to your shelter." The cafeteria erupted. 50 students laughing, recording, waiting for Talia to break. But she didn't. She set down her sandwich with careful movements, picked up her tray, and without a single word or tear, she walked to the trash cans, dumped her uneaten lunch, and left. "That's what I thought," Brittany's voice followed her. "Run away, homeless." Madison kept recording. But for half a second, barely noticeable, her finger hesitated over the stop button. Something flickered across her face. Discomfort. Recognition. She didn't stop filming, but she didn't laugh either. Remember that moment. It will matter later. The east stairwell was empty after the final bell. This was Talia's sanctuary, a forgotten corner of Jefferson High where nobody ever went, where the security camera watched an empty hallway, where she could exist without being perceived or judged. She had discovered it freshman year and claimed it as her own. She sat on the cold concrete steps, knees pulled tight to her chest, back pressed against the cinder block wall, and finally allowed herself to cry. The tears came silently. She had learned years ago to cry without making a sound, to grieve without witnesses, to break down only in places where no one could use her pain against her. The cafeteria scene replayed behind her closed eyes. The laughter, the phones, the $5 bills spinning through the air. Brittany's voice. "This stage is for people with actual talent." Maybe she was right. Maybe Talia was foolish to dream. But as she cried, something strange happened. She started to hum. The humming emerged without conscious decision, rising from somewhere deep in her chest. It became a melody. Grandma Ruth's melody. The melody became words, and before Talia fully realized what she was doing, she was singing. "Rise." Her voice filled the empty stairwell, bouncing off concrete walls, multiplying and swelling into something far larger than the small space could contain. It was deep and rich, trained by years of singing in cramped apartments and hospital waiting rooms and church basements. It carried the weight of generations. She didn't notice the janitor's cart at the bottom of the stairs. Mr. James Davis stood frozen, mop in hand, eyes wide. In 30 years at Jefferson High, he had heard thousands of students, class projects, choir rehearsals, talent show auditions. Never anything like this. The song ended. The final note faded into silence. Talia opened her eyes and saw him, her face flushed with embarrassment. But he wasn't laughing. He wasn't reaching for a phone. He was looking at her the way you look at something sacred. "Young lady," he said quietly, "you should let people hear that." "It's just something my grandmother taught me." "Ruth Anderson?" Her head snapped up. "How do you know her name?" He smiled, sad, knowing. "That's a story for another time. But trust me, that voice is a gift. Don't let anyone make you hide it." He picked up his mop and walked away. That night, Talia sat at the kitchen table, medical bills spread before her like accusations. Grandma Ruth's trophy caught the lamplight. $2,000. She opened her phone. The talent show sign-up form glowed on the screen. "Baby?" Grandma Ruth's voice drifted from the bedroom. "Why you look so serious?" "Just thinking, Grandma." A pause. Then, "Don't think. Sing. That's what we do." Talia's finger hovered over the submit button. She clicked it. 3 days later, the auditorium hummed with nervous energy. Preliminary auditions for the Jefferson High Talent Show had drawn approximately 30 students, dancers stretching in corners, comedians muttering punchlines under their breath, musicians tuning instruments, singers doing vocal warm-ups that ranged from impressive to painful. The air smelled of hairspray and ambition and barely contained terror. Ms. Linda Brooks, the music teacher, sat in the front row with a clipboard, flanked by 2 student judges. One was Kyle, a senior drummer who had placed second the previous year. The other was Brittany Harrington, student council president, 3-time defending champion, already dressed as though the competition was merely a formality. Talia stood backstage in the shadows, trying to make herself invisible. It was a skill she had perfected over 14 years of practice. She wore her grandmother's old church dress, ivory fabric with delicate hand-stitched embroidery along the neckline and hem, clearly from another era, slightly too big in the shoulders. It had hung in their closet for years, preserved in plastic like a sacred relic. When Talia had put it on that morning, Grandma Ruth had started crying before she could even zip it up. "That's my championship dress," she had whispered, reaching out with trembling fingers to touch the familiar fabric. "Wore it in 1978 when I won at Jefferson County. Lord have mercy, I never thought I'd see this dress on a stage again." Now Talia smoothed the fabric with trembling hands, clutching her worn leather notebook like a shield. The notebook contained the handwritten lyrics to Rise, not because she needed them, but because holding it made her feel like Grandma Ruth was standing right beside her. "Oh my God." She looked up. Brittany stood a few feet away, arms crossed, one perfect eyebrow arched in theatrical disbelief. She actually showed up. Brittany turned to Madison, who hovered nearby with her phone already in position. "Get your camera ready. This is going to be absolutely priceless. I want every humiliating second." Madison pulled out her phone, but her movements seemed slower than usual, her expression difficult to read. One by one, the acts took the stage. A hip-hop dance crew of 5 sophomores executed a technically proficient but emotionally hollow routine, impressive flips and synchronized moves, nothing that touched the heart. A junior named Trevor told jokes that earned polite laughter. A violinist played Vivaldi with mechanical precision and zero passion. Brittany's friend Courtney performed a current pop hit. Her voice was pitch perfect, clearly rehearsed for months, ready for auto-tune and Instagram clips. She hit every note without missing a beat and left absolutely no impression whatsoever. Then the stage manager called the next name. Talia Anderson. Whispers rippled through the auditorium like wind through dry leaves. Phones rose throughout the space, not to capture talent, but to document anticipated failure. The homeless girl, the charity case, the dare. This was what they had really come for. Talia walked to center stage. The auditorium fell into a particular kind of silence, not respectful, but predatory. the silence of an audience waiting for a train wreck, already composing their mocking captions. She could see Brittany in the front row, smirk firmly in place, phone angled for optimal footage. She could see Ms. Brooks, expression carefully neutral, pen poised above clipboard. She could see, in the very back corner, Mr. Davis pretending to sweep, while his eyes stayed fixed on the stage. No backing track. Talia had requested none. For a moment, she simply stood in the silence, letting it press against her like a physical weight. She thought of her grandmother in that bed, voice stolen by disease, singing now only through her granddaughter. She thought of her mother, dead before Talia was old enough to remember her face, existing only in photographs and stories. She thought of every morning making oatmeal before dawn, every night singing lullabies to ease pain, every single day spent being invisible. Then she thought of Mr. Davis's words, "Don't let anyone make you hide it." She closed her eyes, drew a breath from somewhere deeper than her lungs, opened her mouth, and the world shifted on its axis. The first note that emerged was not merely a sound, it was a force. Low and rich, it rumbled from somewhere deep in her chest, from a place most people never even know exists. It filled the auditorium like water flooding a dry riverbed, finding every corner, every crack, every cynical heart. Talia was singing Rise. The melody climbed steadily upward. Her voice transitioned from that deep, grounded alto to something higher, clearer, almost crystalline. The lyrics were deceptively simple, about being pushed down and standing up, about being unseen and refusing to disappear, but the delivery transformed them into something universal, something that reached past defenses and touched the raw, vulnerable human hiding beneath. In the front row, the smirk slowly melted from Brittany's face. First came confusion. This wasn't possible. This wasn't how the story was supposed to go. The homeless girl couldn't sing like this. Nobody sang like this. Not in a high school auditorium. Not without professional training and expensive vocal coaches and all the advantages that money could buy. Then came something else entirely. Something that looked almost like fear. By the second verse, phones were still recording, but the purpose had fundamentally changed. Students who had come to capture humiliation found themselves capturing something they didn't have words for. A freshman in the third row felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. A senior athlete slowly lowered his phone because watching through a screen felt somehow wrong. Ms. Brooks leaned forward, clipboard forgotten, gripping her armrest. Madison Keller's phone trembled visibly in her hands. She was supposed to be capturing this for mockery. She was supposed to text the video to the group chat with laughing emojis and cruel captions, but she couldn't look away. Something was cracking inside her, a wall she hadn't even known existed. The bridge of the song arrived, and Talia's voice broke into a run, a gospel riff, a cascade of notes that would challenge most trained professionals, executed with the casual mastery of someone who had been singing in church basements since before she could walk. The notes fell like summer rain, each one distinct, each one intentional, each one carrying the accumulated weight of decades of black church tradition passed down through generations of women. The auditorium held its collective breath. A girl in the back row started crying and couldn't have explained why. Then came the final verse. Talia's voice dropped back to that grounded alto, intimate now, almost conversational, as though she were singing directly to each person individually. She sang about rising, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with quiet, unshakable dignity. The kind of dignity that couldn't be purchased with gymnasium donations or school board seats. The last note hung suspended in the air. 8 seconds. Pure. Unwavering. Impossible. Then silence. 3 seconds passed. 5. The silence stretched into something almost unbearable, not because it was empty, but because it was so completely full of recognition, full of the collective realization that something extraordinary had just occurred. Then, From the very back of the auditorium, a single pair of hands came together. Mr. Davis, clapping alone. The sound echoed like a declaration. Then another pair joined. Then another. Then the dam broke entirely, and the auditorium erupted, not with polite, obligatory applause, but with the stunned, involuntary response of people who had just witnessed something that would stay with them for years. Ms. Brooks rose to her feet. Judges weren't supposed to react, but she couldn't stop herself. "My God," she whispered. Talia opened her eyes. The applause washed over her like a wave, foreign and overwhelming and terrifying and wonderful all at once. She looked at Brittany. Brittany wasn't clapping. Her face had gone pale beneath her makeup, her jaw clenched tight. She was scribbling furiously on her clipboard, not scores, but plans, calculations, damage control. Madison stopped recording. She lowered her phone slowly, slipping it into her pocket. And for the first time in 4 years of friendship with Brittany Harrington, she didn't share what she had captured with anyone. Watch that moment again. When Talia hits the first high note. Look at Madison in the 3rd row. Look at her face. Something was changing. 2 days before the final performance, the rumors began. They spread through Jefferson High like wildfire through dry brush, whispered in hallways between classes, texted in group chats during lectures, posted on anonymous confession pages that the administration pretended didn't exist. The story was devastating in its simplicity. The homeless girl was a fraud. That song she had sung, stolen, plagiarized from some famous gospel artist. Talia Anderson wasn't talented at all. She was a thief. Brittany Harrington stood at the center of it all, showing anyone who would look a fabricated internet search on her phone. A screenshot she had spent hours carefully creating, complete with fake article headlines and doctored images. See? I knew something was wrong. Nobody just sings like that without training. She memorized someone else's song and pretended it was original. By 3rd period, the narrative had solidified into accepted truth. By lunch, it was unquestionable gospel. Talia walked into the cafeteria to a wall of stares and whispers. The same students who had given her a standing ovation now looked at her with open suspicion, even contempt. How dare she trick them into feeling something real? How dare she make fools of them all? Brittany intercepted her near the drink station, voice raised for maximum audience impact. "Hey, homeless! Did you really think nobody would figure it out?" She stepped closer, triumph dancing in her eyes. "You're a thief and a liar. And that song isn't yours. You stole it just like you probably steal everything else." "That song has been in my family for generations," Talia said quietly. "My grandmother wrote it." "Prove it." 2 words. Impossible words. Talia couldn't prove it. Rise had never been recorded. Grandma Ruth had always believed some songs were too sacred for studios. It had never been copyrighted. Who had money for lawyers? It had never been written down anywhere except her grandmother's notebook, in handwriting that a stranger couldn't verify. The oral tradition that had preserved the song for 50 years was now the very thing that made it impossible to defend. That afternoon, Talia was called to Principal Morrison's office. Dr. Ellen Morrison sat behind her desk, hands folded with practiced neutrality. Victoria Harrington, school board member, gymnasium donor, puppet master, occupied the chair by the window, legs crossed, expression radiating satisfaction. "Talia," the principal began, "a serious accusation has been brought to my attention regarding plagiarism." "I didn't plagiarize anything. My grandmother wrote that song in the 1970s. It's never been recorded. I have a notebook with the original lyrics." "A notebook isn't proof," Victoria interrupted smoothly. "Anyone can write words in a notebook. Without proper verification, we simply cannot confirm your claim." Principal Morrison glanced at a photograph on her desk, face down, deliberately hidden, then back at Talia. "I'm sorry, but without evidence to the contrary, I have to suspend your participation pending investigation." Victoria smiled. Outside the office, Brittany waved through the glass. Talia left in a daze. She found herself in the east stairwell again, the same spot where Mr. Davis had heard her sing. She was crying when he found her. "Young lady." His voice was gentle. "Your grandmother, what's her full name?" "Ruth Anderson." "Why?" His eyes went wide. "Ruth Anderson? From Mount Zion Baptist Church?" Talia nodded. "Child." He crouched down to her level. "I sang in her choir. I was 18 years old, 1978. I know that song because she taught it to me herself. I know every word, every note, every breath." Hope flickered in her chest. "You can prove it's hers? I can testify. But my word against the Harringtons?" He shook his head slowly. "We need more." The next morning, the meeting in Principal Morrison's office was not what anyone had expected. Talia sat rigid in her chair, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Beside her stood Mr. Davis in his worn janitor's uniform. Behind them, Ms. Linda Brooks had requested special permission to attend, clutching a folder close to her chest. Victoria Harrington was notably absent. Prior commitment. "Mr. Davis," the principal began, "you've made certain claims about the song in question." "Not claims, ma'am. Facts." His voice carried the quiet dignity of someone who had spent decades being underestimated. "Ruth Anderson taught me Rise at Mount Zion Baptist Church in the summer of 1978. I was 18 years old, fresh out of high school." He hummed the opening bars, pitch perfect, identical to Talia's performance. "That song has been passed down through our community for 50 years. It was never recorded because Mrs. Ruth believed some songs were too sacred for studios." Ms. Brooks stepped forward. "I've conducted my own research. There's no commercial recording of this song in any database anywhere. If it were plagiarized from a famous artist, there would be a trace somewhere. There isn't." She opened her folder carefully. "But I did find this." A photograph, old and slightly faded, clearly from decades ago. Jefferson High's auditorium, recognizable by its distinctive architecture. On stage, a young black woman in an ivory dress held a trophy aloft, her face radiant with triumph. "Jefferson County Gospel Championship 1978, hosted right here at this school. Winner, Ruth Anderson." Principal Morrison took the photograph with trembling hands, stared at it for a long moment. "That's the same dress," Talia whispered. "The one I wore." The principal looked at her, really looked, for the first time. Something flickered in her eyes. She glanced at the face-down photo on her desk. "The accusation was unfounded." Her voice was quiet but firm. "Talia Anderson is reinstated to the competition." Relief flooded through Talia like warm water. "Thank you," she said to Mr. Davis. "Thank you so much." He shook his head gently. "Your grandmother changed my life. This is the least I owe." But Ms. Brooks pulled Talia aside as they left. "Be careful. The Harringtons never accept defeat gracefully. They'll try again, and next time, it won't be about the song." That evening, Victoria Harrington's phone was already dialing. The night before the final performance, the knock came. 3 sharp raps on the thin door of their transitional housing unit. Official. Ominous. Talia opened the door to find a woman in a gray pantsuit holding a clipboard, ID badge hanging from her neck. Behind her stood a uniformed police officer. "Child Protective Services. Are you Talia Anderson?" The next hour was a blur of clinical questions. Where were her parents? When did she last see a doctor? How often was she left alone? Was her grandmother capable of providing adequate care? Did she miss school to handle household responsibilities? The woman walked through their tiny apartment with a critical eye, making notes on her clipboard. She noted the cramped conditions, the medical equipment beside Grandma Ruth's bed, the water stains on the ceiling, the hot plate that served as a stove. Grandma Ruth answered every question with quiet dignity, but Talia could see the pain behind her grandmother's eyes. An anonymous report was filed, the woman explained. Concerns about potential neglect and environmental stability. Anonymous. Talia knew exactly who had filed it. The worker left without making any immediate decisions, but the message was clear. Talia's entire world was now on a timer. The next morning, the day of the final performance, Principal Morrison called her to the office again. Victoria Harrington was there, smiling. "I'm so glad CPS is involved," Victoria said, her voice dripping with false concern. "We simply want what's best for the child. Perhaps she should focus on her living situation rather than extracurricular activities." Something shifted inside Talia. Not fear anymore, not despair. Something harder. "My grandmother raised me," Talia said, her voice low but steady as steel. "She sacrificed everything for me. She worked 3 jobs when she was healthy. She taught me to read, to sing, to stand up straight when the world tried to push me down." She looked directly at Victoria. "And you don't know anything about us. You just don't want me to win because your daughter can't handle losing to someone she considers beneath her." The room went completely silent. Victoria's smile vanished. Principal Morrison looked between them, frozen. "I think," Victoria said coldly, "that we should postpone any decisions until after a full investigation." "I think," Principal Morrison replied slowly, something shifting in her voice, "we should allow the student to perform tonight. The investigation can proceed separately." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Ellen, think very carefully about whose side you're on." But something had changed in the principal's face. She was looking at her desk photo again. "Talia, you may go. Prepare for tonight." That evening, Talia sat on the edge of Grandma Ruth's bed and told her everything. For the first time in years, Grandma Ruth cried, not from illness, but from grief at what her granddaughter was enduring. "Baby, I'm so sorry. This isn't fair." Then she dried her tears with the corner of her bedsheet, reached out, took Talia's face in her hands. "You listen to me now. Those people have power, but they don't have what we have. They don't have our history. They don't have our blood. They don't have our song." Her grip tightened. "You sing tomorrow night. Sing it for me, for your mama, for every woman in our family who never got to stand on that stage. You sing and don't stop until they feel it in their bones." Talia squeezed back. "What if they take me away from you?" Grandma Ruth smiled. "They can move your body wherever they want, but they can't touch what's in here." She pressed her hand to Talia's heart. "Now go show them who you are." The morning of the competition, something remarkable was happening in the shadows. Mr. James Davis woke before dawn and reached for his phone. He had calls to make, old numbers, some not dialed in decades, some probably disconnected by now. "Hello? This is James Davis. I sang in the choir at Mount Zion back in '78. I need witnesses who remember Ruth Anderson. It's about her granddaughter. Tonight, Jefferson High." By 10 a.m., 3 elderly members of Mount Zion Baptist Church had confirmed they would attend. Mrs. Dorothy Williams, 81, who had been Ruth Anderson's closest friend. Mr. Harold Green, 78, who had played piano for the choir for 40 years. Reverend Thomas Mitchell, retired now, who remembered every singer who had ever blessed his congregation. They remembered Ruth Anderson. They remembered Rise. They were ready to testify. Meanwhile, Ms. Linda Brooks spent her free period in the school archives, a dusty basement room no one had visited in years. She was looking for something specific. After 2 hours of searching, she found it, a box labeled 1978 Events. Inside were more photographs from the Gospel Championship, old programs, newspaper clippings, and one article, its edges brittle with age, Local choir director Ruth Anderson takes top prize with original composition. Original composition. Documented proof from over 40 years ago. Meanwhile, Mr. Davis remembered the hallway security camera, the one he had mentioned to Talia weeks ago. He found Derek Coleman, a quiet sophomore who had been silently rooting for Talia since the audition. "Can you pull footage from last week? The East hallway?" Derek could, and what he found made his hands shake. The footage showed Victoria and Brittany meeting in the hallway the day before the plagiarism accusations began. Their conversation was inaudible, but the visuals were damning. Victoria handing papers to Brittany, Brittany examining them, stuffing them into her locker. Derek zoomed in. Fake plagiarism evidence, and a handwritten note with the CPS hotline number circled twice. Coordinated, premeditated, documented. But the final piece came from the most unexpected source of all. Madison Keller hadn't slept. She had spent all night watching 2 videos over and over. The cafeteria humiliation. Brittany's voice. Bus fare back to your shelter. The audition performance. And in the background, Brittany's whisper, make sure you get the part where she fails. But Talia hadn't failed. At 6 a.m., hands trembling, Madison sent Ms. Brooks a message. I have the full recordings, both of them. I want to help. By 7 a.m., an unlikely coalition had gathered in an empty classroom. Mr. Davis, Ms. Brooks, 3 elderly witnesses, Derek with his laptop, and, hiding just outside the door, Madison Keller. They had testimony, archival proof, security footage, Madison's recordings. They had everything. We confront the principal before the show, Ms. Brooks said. Present everything, force transparency. Force. And Mr. Davis nodded. One thing, don't tell Talia. Don't let her carry this weight. Let her focus on one thing only. Which is? He smiled. Singing. The auditorium was packed beyond capacity. 400 people filled the seats. Students, parents, teachers, community members who had heard rumors of something worth seeing. Standing room only. People lined the walls. Backstage, Talia stood alone in her grandmother's ivory dress. She didn't know about the evidence. She didn't know about the coalition. She only knew she had been told to show up. So she had. Brittany found her near the curtain. What are you doing here? You were disqualified. Talia met her eyes. Nobody told me that. Before Brittany could respond, Principal Morrison appeared. Talia, I need to speak. The auditorium doors burst open. Mr. Davis walked in, followed by Ms. Brooks, 3 elderly strangers in their Sunday best, and Derek clutching a laptop. Madison trailed behind them, pale and trembling. Morrison, Ms. Brooks said calmly. We have evidence you need to see. Now, before this competition begins. What happened next unfolded in front of 400 witnesses. The coalition presented their case systematically. Ms. Brooks laid out the archival evidence, the newspaper article, the photographs. Mr. Davis and the elderly witnesses testified about Ruth Anderson's legacy, about learning Rise directly from its creator over 4 decades ago. Then Derek played the security footage. 400 people watched Victoria hand papers to Brittany, watched Brittany examine fake plagiarism evidence, watched her stuff it into her locker alongside a note with the CPS hotline number. Victoria rose from her seat. This is hearsay. There's more, Ms. Brooks said. Madison stepped forward, trembling visibly. She handed over her phone. The recording played through the auditorium speakers. Brittany's whisper, make sure you get the part where she fails. Then the cafeteria recording. Cafeteria. The $5 bill. Every cruel word. 400 people heard it all. Brittany's face went bone white. She looked desperately at her mother, but Victoria was already calculating damage, planning her exit. Principal Morrison reached for her desk photo, the one that had been face down for 12 years. She turned it over, A young girl, 14, in a choir robe. Mid-song. Beautiful. Alive. Gone. "My daughter Emily," she said, voice thick. "She died 12 years ago. She loved to sing." She set the photo down, face up now. "This competition will proceed. Talia Anderson will perform, and afterward, there will be a full investigation into certain conduct." Victoria left without a word. Brittany remained frozen, completely exposed. Then Talia took the stage. The auditorium fell silent. She closed her eyes, thought of Grandma Ruth, opened her mouth, and sang. Rise filled the space like it had been written for this exact moment. Every verse carried history. Women told they were nothing who chose to become something anyway. By the second verse, people were crying. By the bridge, even students who had mocked her sat in reverent silence. Principal Morrison pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming freely. She wasn't crying because it was beautiful. She was crying because for 4 minutes, she heard her daughter again. The final note. 8 seconds. Then thunderous, standing applause. Watch the principal's face when Talia hits the bridge. Watch her reach for Emily's photo. That's when everything changed. Talia won unanimously. The $2,000 scholarship was hers. But the money was almost beside the point. What she had truly won was something far more valuable. In the days that followed, the investigation began in earnest. The security footage and Madison's recordings were submitted to the school board. Brittany was suspended from student council and stripped of her previous titles. Victoria Harrington's position on the school board was placed under formal review. The CPS complaint was traced back to their household and officially dismissed as malicious harassment. Madison approached Talia in the hallway that Monday. "I should have stopped it from the beginning," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Years ago. I'm sorry." Talia studied her for a long moment. "You did stop it, when it mattered most." They weren't friends yet. Maybe they never would be. But something had shifted. Principal Morrison visited the Anderson apartment on a Tuesday evening. She brought yellow roses for Grandma Ruth and sat in their cramped living room like she belonged there. "Mrs. Anderson," she said, "I owe you an apology. I forgot what this school was supposed to be about. Your granddaughter reminded me." Then she told them something no one had known. "Your grandmother performed on that stage in 1978. I was 8 years old. I was in the audience with my mother. I watched her win." She paused. "I'd forgotten until I saw Talia up there. The same dress, the same song. It was like time collapsed." Talia looked at her grandmother. "You never told me it was at Jefferson High?" Grandma Ruth smiled. "Some stories need the right moment." Principal Morrison stood to leave. At the door, she turned back. "Talia, I'd like to recommend you for Westbrook Academy of Performing Arts. Full scholarship." At a school assembly the following week, Mr. James Davis was honored for 30 years of service and integrity. He received a standing ovation, the same auditorium celebrating the man who had believed in Talia when no one else would. Ms. Linda Brooks established the Ruth Anderson Music Scholarship for students from underrepresented backgrounds, and Rise was officially registered with the Library of Congress as an American folk gospel song, credited to Ruth Anderson, 1974. That night, Talia sat at Grandma Ruth's bedside and sang Rise one more time, just for them. When she finished, Grandma Ruth took her hand. "Baby, you didn't just win a competition. You brought me home." Talia Anderson was called homeless, called poor, called a thief and a liar. But she stood on that stage and opened her mouth, and something happened that money cannot buy and power cannot fake. She made them feel. She made the principal cry. She made the bullies go silent. She made an entire auditorium remember what it means to be human. Brittany Harrington had everything: designer clothes, connections, 3 trophies on her shelf. But she couldn't touch an audience the way Talia did. Because talent isn't about what you have. It's about what you carry. Talia carried her grandmother's voice, her mother's memory, generations of women who never got their moment. She carried all of that up to a microphone and let it out. Today, Talia is on full scholarship at Westbrook Academy of Performing Arts. Grandma Ruth is still with us, still humming, still smiling. And Rise is officially registered with the Library of Congress, credited to Ruth Anderson, 1974. The bully threw money at her feet, but Talia picked up something far more valuable: her voice. And once she found it, nobody could take it away. If it were you, if someone dared you to show your gift in front of a crowd that had already decided you would fail, would you step up? What would you sing? Who in your life is a Talia, who's been judged unfairly, written off before they had a chance? Maybe it's time to tell them you see them. There's one detail only sharp eyes will catch. Go back to the cafeteria scene. Watch Madison's face when Talia doesn't pick up the money. That half second is where everything started to change. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like, subscribe, and comment below. What song would you sing if you had one shot to make them listen? And stick around. Next time, I'm telling you about a janitor who overheard a homeless man praying in an empty church. And what he did next will make you question everything about who deserves a second chance.